Hey, welcome, Talent Warriors, to another episode of the Talent War podcast. It's me, George Randle, your host, and we have a special guest on today, which I'll be introducing shortly. But today we are going to talk about military transition, leadership in the civilian sector, why leadership is leadership, and really right people, right seats, which is really what seems to be on everybody's mind, how to hire faster, how to hire better. But I want you to stay tuned because we're really going to get into the dynamics of getting the right people, the right leaders that really, really make a difference. So stand by. Here we come. Hey, and welcome back, Talent Warriors. And today, my special guest is the great Dan Bradley. And you guys don't know him. Eventually, you're gonna. The great thing about Dan is he's this Air Force Academy graduate that came to the Talent War Group and, immediately... it's one of those things that the minute you're talking to somebody, you've got talent sitting in front of you. And we were really, really fortunate to represent Dan and place him with one of the many companies that come to us. But, after a year in the job, I wanted to bring him on. I wanted to talk to him about right people, right seats. I want to talk to him about his transition. So, folks, true privilege. I get Mr. Dan Azumi. Don't have to talk slower. I just have to be a little bit more articulate. I'm an Army guy. He's an Air Force guy. I got to make sure I'm using the proper words so he thinks this is a professional show. The Air Force does have much higher standards, especially for us Army nugs. So anyway, Dan, hey, man, brother, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's good to see you.
George, good to see you too. Privilege is mine. I just really appreciate the opportunity. And, it's always good just to catch up.
Yeah, it is. And so I'm going to do something a little different because I'm a little bit fascinated. For those listeners out there, I got to celebrate over the weekend my birthday. And I turned 50 for the 6th time. That's my new version of math. I call it millennial math. And but it sounds really, really good. But when I went to transition, Dan, it was a huge challenge. And it was one of those things where as much as we talk about being, courageous or facing our fears or overcoming a lot of difficulties as leaders in the military and leading troops, it was a pretty daunting thing to transition. So if you would, how did you find the Air Force? And then bring us through to your transition and how you landed.
How I found the Air Force was kind of on accident. And it was something I was directed to through a couple of letdowns and a couple of failures. And they turned out to be the greatest things that ever happened to me. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, and going through high school, really started to notice the Air Force Academy up on the hill. It's kind of hard to miss. It basically looks like a giant silver spire sticking out of the hill. But I wasn't really sure whether or not it was for me. And part of me really wanted to get out of Colorado Springs. I wanted to try new things and go different places. So I applied primarily to the Naval Academy and to the Coast Guard Academy. And I did well initially. I got the congressional nominations and all that stuff. I thought I was well on my way. And then, if you're getting into the academy, you get a thick letter in the mail. You get a nice big envelope. If you're not getting the academy, you get a very small envelope. And I got a couple of very small envelopes. The Air Force Academy's Falcon Foundation, and they offered me a year at New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell. If you haven't been to Roswell, good on you. But Roswell is a great place to spend a year of your life. Basically, went there, brushed up on the academic pieces, really improved the SAT, ACT, stuff like that. And just built a better package to get in. Second application, I was accepted. And I went there really wanting to be a pilot. I thought I had my heart set on that. Turns out I'm not really cut out for that. The first time I ever flew anything, it was just a glider. And it's awesome when you have the instructor in the back of the glider who's covering up for your mistakes and making sure you're not about to die. But the first time I was up there solo, I wasn't super comfortable. I didn't do great. I mean, I'm alive. So, and the plane, I'm sure someone still have plane today. So it went as well as one could hope. But I kind of realized flying wasn't for me. So as I went through the academy, I had some fantastic peers and mentors who really pushed me towards the Air Force Special Warfare community. And making that decision was the best decision I've probably ever made in my life, just because of the path it took me down, the people that I got to connect with through it, and all the opportunities that came as a result of it, not just doors that open, but leadership opportunities and chances to grow.
It's funny, Dan, I wanted to be a pilot. Now, I knew coming out of high school because, I don't know, it wasn't for lack of intelligence. I think it was lack of effort. I just didn't, until I got into the military, appreciate, the value of really, really driving hard towards your goals. And I wanted to be a pilot too, but in Army ROTC, after I'd done my enlisted stint and I did the Army ROTC, I was like, oh yeah, I want to fly Apaches, I want to fly. And the academics seemed to hold me back. So I took the second best course of action, which is I jumped out of planes that the Air Force was flying.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
No, back then, no, when I thought I was indestructible, there was nothing absolutely wrong with it. Now at my age with arthritis in the spine and the neck, I'm thinking, yeah, not the brightest of choices. But, I've got a place up in Buena Vista out in Colorado. And yeah, it's an awesome place. And I can't count the number of times that I've went by the Air Force Academy, and I can easily see how that was kind of calling to you to see that, because it's pretty stunning. It's really, really impressive, and good on you, because I just didn't have the discipline. But getting to the Air Force Academy, I mean, people, I don't think understand the difficulty of getting to the academies. I mean, academics, physical fitness, it's everything all balled up into one all the time, 24/7, isn't it?
Yeah. The joke is they want you to be a really well-rounded candidate, right? Physically fit. So the joke was you're so well-rounded that you're pointing what they're trying to get to. But it was honestly a challenge, not just getting in, but getting out, and getting out the right way. The attrition rate's pretty high. I know my family would sponsor several cadets up on the Hill every year when I was growing up, and some of them would make it all the way through the academy, be very successful. Some of them just completely unexpectedly would either choose to leave the academy or the academy would choose for them. And it's definitely a cool environment. It's a great place to be from, even though when you're going through it, there's a couple of days where you're questioning whether it's a great place to be at. But I can honestly say the Air Force Academy gave me so much of what I have today. I mean, I met my wife at the Air Force Academy. We didn't date while we were cadets. It's a long story and it's for another day. But the people that you encounter and just the bonds that you build going through there, and how you improve as kind of this calm, compassionate, but driven leader. It's not by accident. It's very much designed that way to take, these 17, 18-year-old kids and put them through something that is challenging and where they come out better for it on the other side.
What was when I was in ROTC, you're like wearing your uniform once a week, your normal classes, and then you do a bunch of different things. And since I had been enlisted, and I actually, by the time I got commissioned, had made my heart strike E5. What was the hardest part? And then tell me, what do you think the biggest thing you took away from your time at the academy was?
The hardest part for me was the course load. I said earlier, I went to New Mexico Military Institute. I wouldn't have had to if I was really, really good at math and science. I was so good at science at the academy and liked it so much that I took most of my classes twice. It was just a real challenge to get through the place academically. I mean, I was a humanities major. I still have a BS because of all the math, science, and engineering classes that you go through. I remember when I was job hunting and I would push out my resume, I would have people respond to me and say there's a typo on your resume because nobody has a BS in humanities. Or when you're applying to jobs and you pull up the list of what degrees are available for your first selection, it was never there. The academics was a tough part. My biggest takeaway was, without a doubt, there is no perfect. Nothing you will ever do will be perfect. When you go to the academy, it's always a high pressure environment because everything you do from the day you step off the bus and you start your basic training to the day you throw your hat in the air, everything you do is graded, assessed, scored, and then compared to your peers. And the way that they select jobs for most AFSC's, Air Force Specialty Codes, is they will basically total up. They'll tally all of your rankings throughout everything you've ever done there. And they will say this person is the best cadet and this person is the worst cadet. And then everybody will fall in between. So if there's, say, 300 slots for pilot, which is obviously a lot of guys at the academy want to be pilots, and the first person decides they want to be a pilot, all of a sudden there's 299 pilot slots. If for whatever reason the first 300 want to be pilots and you're 301, you're SOL. So there's always this constant pressure. You always have eyes on you. And it's just accepting that whatever you're going to do, it might be good, it might be great, it might be neither of those things, but it's sure not going to be perfect. So aiming for that is probably an unrealistic expectation from the get-go.
Wow. I've written a note because I'm absolutely coming back to that. So what did they assign you as far as a functional specialty coming out of the academy? And where did you go? How many years did you take in? Give me a brief thumbnail of, because when I look at it, I'm like, man, this dude's done some cool stuff. I'm like, I was your run-of-the-mill Mark 1 Mod 0 nug. And so I always look at, people coming out of the academy and people that have been in career fields like you. And I'm like, man, that sounds pretty cool. How did that come about for you?
As a freshman and sophomore, my interest in going to the TACP, the Tactical Air Control Party community, really peaked. And I basically made that my goal. And it was something that I woke up every day. I know kidding had a note on my mirror. How are you going to get closer to this goal today? How are you going to get closer today to being a TACP? And by the time junior year rolled around, I was able to apply to go to selection. And I was asked to come. I was invited. About 40 people attended selection. It was down at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. It's a week of the most fun you never want to have again. By the end of the week, I think we had about 20 to 25 candidates remaining. Of those 20 to 25, I want to say 9 were selected to enter TACP training. And after that, I was one of the few who went into senior year knowing exactly what my career was going to be. And I won't say that benefited my senior year academics in any way. Yes, so that was one of the, I guess, the biggest single points in the academy was being invited to enter TACP training. So after graduation, I went off to my first duty station at Fort Drum, New York. And working with 10th Mountain was awesome. Great bunch of dudes. Some really cool experiences out of there. Got to deploy out of there. Somewhere in the mix, went through the entire TACP pipeline. And basic training for TACP, the initial selection process, the SEER school, all the different specialty schools, the training to be a JTAC or a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, where you actually have that qualification to go overseas and put bombs on targets and bring the fight to where it needs to be brought. After my time at Fort Drum, I went off to Fort Carson, so moved right on back to Colorado and finished my career there working with the 4th Infantry and touching in with 10th Special Forces. We shared a parking lot, so we got some cool training opportunities with them too. But got to do pretty much everything I could ever ask for. I got a fantastic deployment, got to travel a lot, got married somewhere along the way. If I could go back and any one thing different, I wouldn't. It was that kind of experience where it was just everything I could ask for and more. So
I remember when I transitioned, and my last real gig, as I call it, was a company commander. So I was in 03. I had about 200, anywhere from 215 to 225 soldiers. Deployed twice. The Army only is supposed to let you stay in those billets for 18 months. And I caught a deployment at the end. I told my boss, I said, look, I'm not getting off of this horse in midstream. So if I take this company on deployment, I'm bringing them back. And so I got to do a full 2 years. And then I got out of that and I kind of realized it was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to lead again. And it was kind of like this rock just crushed me. Meaning I knew I was going to lead, but it was going to be, another 7-8 years. And I was going to be, this really dates me. Sorry, Dan, you may not even know this word, but I was going to be a Harvard graphics or a PowerPoint ranger. I was going to be confined to doing large scale brigade orders, wing squadron orders, and doing PowerPoint slides for the next 7 to 8 years. And so I took a gig, but then I was like, man, you know what? I really like leading. I'm going to try my hand in the corporate world. So how did that come about for you?
Yeah, for me, there was 2 big considerations, and one of them you just talked about. I'll hit that one first too. For me, the most fun I had and the most reward that I got out of being in the community was being a flight commander, a team leader, being able to get together with the guys and just get after it all day. Being able to go out and train, being able to go out and deploy, being able to go support whatever unit we happen to be aligned with at the time. Having those opportunities was that was just so rewarding for me, and I absolutely loved it. I found out once I pinned on captain that I wasn't going to get those opportunities anymore, more or less put in a scheduling shop or an additional support. Mm-hmm. And, that's one of the things that probably lines up pretty well with the private industry side of what we're going to talk about today. I no longer felt like I was in a seat that I wanted to be in. That's not to say that I wasn't in a seat that the Air Force saw me succeeding in, or that I needed to be in for that next step up that Air Force ladder, because these things are planned. And you know as well as I do that if you don't check the right boxes at the right point in your career, you're not going to make the next grade. So that was really what they were doing, was looking out and making sure that I had the ability to compete for the next level. But at that point, I had lost my desire to really go out and attain that next level, because the thing that I really loved and was really passionate about, I wasn't able to do anymore. The other consideration was 100% family. My wife was also active duty, and we knew that we weren't going to get stationed together after that assignment in Colorado. She was down the road at one of the Air Force bases in town. There's like 6 to choose from. And we kind of sat down and had a really tough decision and came to an answer that I think we both knew in our heads was the right one, but was still a tough one to make, which was, yeah, it's time for us to step out, see what we can go achieve on the outside, but more importantly, do that and support of being able to put down roots and have a family together and things along those lines. And that's exactly what we've done.
It's funny that because you're, as I tell Mike Sorelli, my co-author of the book, he's a GWAT baby, Global War on Terror, for those people who are listening. And I'm a Cold War person. I retired Allied Checkpoint Charlie, was part of that. My soldiers were. I got to sit and observe Berlin. But when it came time when I made that very same decision that you did, I was comfortable making the decision. But then all of a sudden I had this wave come over me going, all right, what is the civilian world, and do they value the same kind of leadership? I don't think I lacked any confidence about being successful in the corporate world. And now when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. But, when you started searching for jobs and started talking to companies, what was it like for you?
So I had that same wave come over me that was like, is this the right decision? But that wave was called COVID. In all seriousness, my wife and I were both trying to figure out what we wanted to do, where we wanted to be. It was the first time in our adult lives that we had that choice. We got to go make that call. Everything up to that was, you're going to be here at this time and you're going to be doing this role for this number of years. So we kind of sat back and were like, hey, the world is our oyster. And we started looking for the jobs we'd want to be in, the places we want to be at. And my wife landed a job opportunity in Minneapolis with a medical device company. And this was midwinter of 2019. So early 2020, kid you not, this story is 100% true. She was getting ready to get on a plane. It was the night prior to us going up to Minneapolis and basically checking out the facility, signing the job offers, things like that. And I'm watching the NBA on TV, and I forget what game it was, but it was that game where right before tip-off, they said, no, we're not playing. Someone just tested positive, and they just cut the whole thing. And we got that real sinking feeling that we're not going to get on a plane tomorrow. So in the morning, we called up the company. They said, yeah, we were about to call you about the same thing. Don't call us, we'll call you. Still haven't heard back. To this day, still have not heard back. So that threw a massive wrench into what we thought was a great thing, because we had started to wrap our heads around the idea of being up in Minneapolis. And I don't do great in the cold, but I lived in Watertown, New York. How bad could it be? It can't be much worse.
Yeah.
We had started to look at houses. We had started to really buy into this plan, and all of a sudden it's just gone. And we had that, what are we doing moment? Can we actually cut it? Unemployment started climbing, and we had a conversation about whether or not this was the right time to make this jump, whether we could hold off for another assignment, whether we could do more time apart. In the first 3 years of our marriage, I think we spent at least a year and a half, maybe full 2 years apart. And I said, no. We're not going to do that. We're going to burn the boats. We're committing to what we're about to do. After that, it was getting real tied in with what at the time was EF Overwatch, and just beginning to work through that introduction to what private industry really is, the skills versus talent approach, and really buying into what these guys at EF Overwatch were telling me was the coming wave of how talent is going to be assessed. And it got me hook, line, and sinker. I was all about it, ready to go from the first phone call I had. And from there, the rest is history. Honestly, it was just a fantastic experience, and it was a godsend. It couldn't have come at a better time.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, since I'm now managing partner of what was EF Overwatch and is now the Talent War Group. But so I kind of want to fast forward a little bit. When I jumped into the corporate world, my first gig was a huge mismatch. Now, I was wildly successful, but it was a huge mismatch. I went through one of those veteran firms, and I got blinded, to be honest with you, it's a big box retailer. Certainly I won't name companies. Wonderful company, wildly successful. I think Fortune 5 at this point, if that gives it away.
Narrows it down.
Yeah, it was such a horrible mismatch, meaning I thought they wanted leaders. I thought I asked all the right questions, but I remember they wanted management. They didn't want leadership. And I know the company that you went to wanted leadership, obviously why they selected you. So how was it jumping into the corporate world? And let me ask it more directly. What I found, and what I've been telling people for a long time, whether I was creating veterans programs or I'm coaching veterans, is that the same leadership principles that made you successful in the military are going to make you successful in the corporate world. I'm completely okay if you disagree with me, but what did you find when it came to the leadership skills that you brought to the corporate world?
No, I totally agree with that. I will say there's an asterisk in that communicating those skills, communicating those processes is a lot tougher, Because, I mean, you have to remember when you have someone like leaving the military at age 25, they've probably been doing this since they were 18. This is really what they know. They've grown up with this. It's not just what they know, it's all they know. So these kinds of things really come second nature, especially when you're talking to guys who have come from working on the more elite teams and especially the small teams. These things are not nice to haves. These things are not, it's okay, we'll get you there, we'll teach it to you. They really can be the difference and have been the difference between who lives and who dies. So you don't get to slack on these leadership principles. Communicating that in an effective way in the military and communicating that in an effective way in private industry, two very different things. And the company that I came to, they really placed a huge emphasis on the leadership principles, and they could state them. They could lay them out for you. They were that deep into it. They could tell you exactly what the concept was. The only hiccup was application of the principles. And it did take not just a top-down approach, and I think this is where we really hit our stride, was a bottom-up approach for every single person in the company being exposed to these leadership principles so that they know what we're talking about, they know what we're trying to accomplish, they know why we're trying to accomplish it, and they can buy into those principles as we're still learning them, and then not just watch us implement them, but be a part of implementing them.
You know what? That is just a great advertisement for the company where you're at. And what's interesting is, one of the things that we track, and I know you follow our LinkedIn content, and actually you're a significant contributor to a lot of the content and stuff that we do. And obviously the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I don't even know that we're considered post-pandemic, but hiring is such a huge issue. And one of the things I did this little video vignette on was top talent has choices. And one of the things that drove me nuts, because eventually my previous role was the vice president of global talent acquisition, I rarely ever lost candidates in the hiring process because of my recruiters. I had more trouble training my hiring managers as to why should somebody work for you. And it sounds like where you are, that based on your approach, it's you guys have a much, I'm going to let you describe it, but do you think you have a much easier time finding the right people for the right seats because you know those leadership principles and can articulate them to people that may be interested in your firm?
I think that easy might be the wrong word for it because, we made this very conscious decision as a company. The leadership team of the company sat down and said, 1, we're going to grow, and 2, we're going to grow responsibly. So not only is the company trying to get bigger, trying to have a greater reach, and not just in what we do in business, but impacting the community as well. Not just are we trying to drive more revenue, but we're trying to give the right people the best opportunity to succeed, not just at this company, but at whatever company they end up. Lifers, guys who will go into a job at age 18 and retire from the same company at age 60, that's not going to be really a thing in my generation. It hurts to say the word, but the millennial generation, because I know the connotation that comes along with it, it's not going to be a thing. So there are going to be people bouncing from companies or chasing new opportunities or, God forbid, being laid off or fired. But understanding what success in the role looks like and being able to communicate that effectively is the single most important piece of this. Because if you don't understand what success looks like in a role, there's 0% chance that whatever talent you're trying to go after or whoever you're trying to snag is going to be able to be successful because they'll never understand it. If you don't get it, they can't get it.
You know what? That's the line I'm going to pull out of this for advertising this podcast, because I can't tell you, for 20 plus years, I sound like for those that remember records, but I feel like I'm just repeating the same message over and over, that if you do not know what success looks like, it's like going to the grocery store hungry, or rather, when my wife sends me to the grocery store without a list. I'm going to come back with double stuffed Oreos. I'm going to come back with a whole lot of things that I'm not supposed to have. And if you don't know what success looks like, I think you said it just brilliantly. So did you feel that was in place before you got there, or do you think that's a continually evolving thing? Or how do you, as a key and senior leader there, apply that to making sure that you know what success looks like and that you're selecting the right people?
Well, it's something that evolves all the time. Anytime that you bring on a new individual, or anytime that you open up a new role and even start advertising that you're hiring for that position, what the right team dynamic is and what the right person for any given seat might be is going to shift. And it might not be this earth-shattering shift where you have to rethink the whole position and fit in the company or whatever. But it's going to adjust. So understanding, well, if you have a company of 20 people and that company grows to a company of 50 or 100 people, what was the right person for that 20 person company is highly unlikely to be the right person for that 50 or 100 person company. And that's nothing against that person. It's just the nature of the game has changed really, really quickly. And it's probably definitely never in my life changed as quickly as it did last year, while we're trying to start being more conscious about not only who we're going after, but why we're going after them, how we're advertising these jobs, in what ways we're advertising them, so we're making sure we reach the people we want to reach. It's just this constantly evolving. It's a moving target. If it was still, it'd be boring, so I guess that's a good thing. But it really is a moving target.
So with how your firm hires, so it's been my experience, and one of the things that we coach is exactly the point. You have to know what success looks like, because, you know, I hate to say it, and you remember training with automatic weapons, that you always get that private, that airman that's out there that's spray and pray, that's just rattling off and pulling trigger, won't let go, letting rounds go down range. You know, I found that with hiring managers, that, hey, let's just put everything we can in the job description and let's post this as many places as we can and screen as many people as we can until, yeah, I've got a good feeling that, what the heck, let's give this one a shot. It sounds like you guys are a whole lot more methodical and purposeful in how you go to market and how you select. So what have you learned when doing this for your company and, you know, seeing the candidates come in the door, pandemic, post-pandemic, et cetera?
Stop me if this takes the question too far off the rails, but
I never worry about that, Dan. I never worry about that.
The first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about putting the right person in the right seats, growing the company, anything like that, the first thing through my mind isn't how we hire. It's how are we going to retain? Because you talked about that, just like spray and pray. You don't know what that round's going to hit, but it's going to hit something. The likelihood of it hitting something bad just seems to be a whole lot higher than the likelihood of exactly what you would like it to hit. And if it does, it's not because you're a good shot. You got lucky. The most important thing to me is making sure that if you do have those people that are solid contributors to the team, those people that wake up every day and look forward to going to the office and grinding, and who put aside whatever might be a limiting factor or restrictor in their ability to get up and just go crush that day. If you have those people already on your team, it doesn't matter how good you're hiring if that guy's getting ready to leave or if that girl's getting ready to leave. Number one has to be, I need that person in that chair and progressing up the company. I need him to be maximizing his potential for as long as I can.
Man, I love that. And I'm glad you took it that way. I just interviewed on this podcast who I call my evil twin, Karen Clark. We were colleagues. We were peers at my previous company. And we were talking about, you know, the retention aspect. And you know what? You just brought up a great point that we talk so much. I think, man, you've just given me a new topic. That's going to go on the list of things, is retention. You're right. Hiring doesn't matter if you're not retaining the good people that you have. But you know that some of them, even though you invested in them, some of them are going to want to grow faster. They're going to want to be promoted. They're going to be capable or have the potential to be promoted faster. And those people in my team, you know, they'd always get a reference from me. And I would say, hey, just help me find your replacement. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's go off the rails. What do you think's most important when it comes to retention? I mean, what things do you kind of zero in on? What things do you think are important as a leader to drive retention higher?
Here we go. If we're going off the rails, we're going real off the rails. I'll take us back.
Let's go.
The TACB community, for the entire time I was in it, was a quote unquote critically manned career field, which means that you have so low manning that it's getting to a point where it may start to impact mission readiness. So retention was this huge, huge deal. And I remember group and wing commanders going around to all the squadrons and talking to primarily junior officers to try to get their take on why people aren't staying. And keep in mind, this is a career field that people dedicate years and years and years just to getting considered for. No one ends up in that community by accident. Like, oh, I can't find another job, I'll just go be a TACP. So those are people who have the drive. If they're there, they obviously have the capability. They're competent in not just their fitness, not just their mental acuity, but they're supposed to be there. And then they're intentionally making the decision to leave. So one of the big things that kept coming up in these conversations, it was stuff about lifestyle. I mean, so are you familiar, George, with the term dwell time?
No, that's a new one on me. Go for it.
Dwell time is a measure that the Air Force at least used, I don't know if they use it anymore, to basically say it's like the health of a unit based on how much time you're spending either at your home station and going home every night or somewhere else, typically deployed. So a dwell time of 1-to-1 would mean that for every night I'm at my home station, I'm spending somewhere else, or one night somewhere else. I think, and don't quote me on this, but it sounds right, the Air Force standard dwell time is 3-to-1. And we had dudes in our unit and across all the units in the community who for years and years and years would have like 0.6-to-1 dwell times. So they were just gone. And they said, if we're going to be operating this capacity, then I need there to be more considerations for how I'm spending my time with my family. I need to be able to say no to some training opportunities, stuff like that. So the Air Force took that feedback and came back and offered a bonus. It's called the SRB. And to be fair, it's not a small bonus. Like, it's a considerable amount of money. I think across all the career fields in 2021, it's like $55 million combined. So it's a fair amount of money. But not one person that I talked to, it's a small community. Everybody seems to know everybody else. Not one time in the discussion of am I going to stay or am I going to go, did the SRB come up. So that's a case where, to put that in private industry terms, people were asking for benefits. The Air Force offered salary, or the company offered salary, and it was a very quick no. So I think that especially with the next generation, again, hurts to say it, millennials, and what's following that, the Gen Xers who are starting to get into private industry, salary isn't so much the name of the game. Is it Gen X or Gen Z that comes after?
I think it's Gen Z. I'm still trying to figure out my own generation. I mean, I think I fall on that cusp, kind of like astrological signs. I'm somewhere between baby boomer and Gen X. I don't know what they call me, but I have gray on my whiskers, so I consider myself a boomer.
I just don't know what the reality of the whole thing is with when it comes to like the generational gaps. But with the younger people, what we would classify as quote unquote young talent, I think compensation is going to take a back seat to benefits and lifestyle considerations, both in acquisition and in retention.
Oh, yeah. Karen and I were talking about that. And, as Mike and I described in the book, look, if you're not in the ballpark on compensation, you're going to struggle. But it's getting further and further away from the top two slots that's the number one consideration. And so, when Karen and I were talking, it was like, listen, how are you investing in your people? How are you making sure that your critical players, your high potentials, and even just those, what we call 5-box, if you've ever done a 9-box exercise, you're smack dab in the middle. Those are the people, moderate potential, moderate performance, but they're grinders. You need that core, that middle of the bell curve, as you say. And how do you retain those people? Let me ask you this. If you're not looking at comp, what's successful for your company in making sure that you retain great people?
So this is where, like, my current role right now, I'm a sales director. I think that HR and the mindset that HR takes, and take this with a grain of salt because I've spent exactly 0 days in my life in an HR seat. They take more of a sales-minded approach to how they're going to sell employees and prospects on staying with the company. So all that sales is identifying a problem that a prospect has, figuring out a way to solve it that adds value, and communicating it effectively and quickly enough for them to understand that, yes, this is the solution I need. So let's just take quote unquote young talent, mid-20s to mid-30s, and say, what are some problems that generation is facing that is really, really important, that is what an effective HR leader could solve? So you and Karen talked about this one quote, or this one statistic. 52% of people right now, 52% of gainfully employed people are looking for another job. So this is not just young talent. This is across the board. But right now, remote work attracts talent. I'm sorry it took so long to get that out. but I know that you've put out podcasts before where you're talking about, I don't know about remote work. I don't know about the mindset. I don't know if it's effective. There's fair considerations in that. But right now, remote work does attract talent. Period. So we've already said that 52% of employed people are looking for new jobs. There's other data out there that says, 42% of employees, I think is the last number I saw, would rather quit their jobs than go back to full-time office setting. And just to pull the generational gap again, 63% of millennial and Gen Z workers prefer a hybrid setting. So the talent that's going to be most sought after in coming years overwhelmingly wants to have flexibility, to the point that it's no longer optional. It's factual. It's a data-driven conclusion. So sorry to say, whatever an organization's opinion on that might be is kind of irrelevant. I would much rather face the problem of having to go find a leader who can effectively manage in a remote setting, who can effectively drive their team in a remote setting, than have to go find more people because all my talent just left to a remote setting. I mean, to rephrase that data, if you're going to hold the hard line that you won't offer flexibility, then one, you're going to lose half your team. And two-thirds of the talent pool that you're going to search through to replace those team members aren't even going to be interested in what you have to offer. Like, that's not an ultimatum.
No, I'm in agreement with you. And Tom and I think it was a few podcasts ago, we were talking about the ability to break bread with people, the ability to be social. And, then when I talked to, Tom was a big proponent of, to the degree that you can, bring people back into the office. And I loved it, but I always had a very, very long leash for people being able to work remote. I don't care if you're sitting on the beach in St. Croix. If you're productive and you're contributing and you're collaborative, and we had a mantra of teamwork, ownership, humility. If you've got those things, hey, go work from the moon, whatever floats your boat. And when I was talking to Karen says, yeah, you're going to have to approach this from a flex perspective. And so have you found that to be challenging, or do you find it a whole lot easier? Is it an adjustment for you, or is it just something... You know what, where I want to go with this is that one of the things that I love about military leaders, and why I've always, one of the hundreds of reasons I've shared with companies that veterans are a great bet, is that whether we're managing remote, or we're managing in person, or we're managing and leading in a flex environment, we know how to do it. But that's a struggle. I think a lot of people are worried about, the flex environment and being able to manage and still drive results. Has it been a challenge for you?
It has. I will say that the industry that I'm in makes remote work really, really hard because it's construction. You have to have guys on the ground doing the job. And for them to go out and spend a whole day in the hot sun doing real, real tough work and then come back and see that everybody else is on their laptops, it sets a difficult standard to try to explain. So there's that challenge piece to it. But I mean, like you said, there's people who have gained the ability to lead in just about any setting. And that's not something that's necessarily cocky or egotistical to say, because it was acquired through failure and failure and failure before you figured out what worked. But I think the biggest component to all that is trust, 100% trust. I'll say on my deployment to Iraq, I remember getting into Baghdad and trying to figure out where all these different dislocated teams were, who they were working with, what their mission set was. But there were guys that I had never met. I still understood that they had the TACP patch on their shoulder. I still understood that they knew how to do their job. I trusted them to make good decisions, because if they're on my team, if they have been vetted to the point where they're good to be here, then I trust their decision-making process. And my job is no longer to micromanage them. My job is to enable them. So I think that trust is the key component, and that's really, really, really hard to build. But if you can get past that trust piece, everything else will fall into place, and will fall into place effortlessly. But that's the first domino to get the others to fall.
That kind of brings me around to the note that I wrote about a lesson that you said is it's never, ever going to be perfect. So when it comes to retention, when it comes to right people, right seats, I know we're always striving for perfection. But when you approach retention, when you approach leadership, the relationships, building trust, in the corporate world, and you can't be perfect, what do you think it is that you're striving for most, or what do you keep foremost in mind when you are leading people? That's a loaded, tough question, I know, but I had to ask.
The tough answer to that tough question is, how do we get less bad at what we're doing today? So I think that's phrased very intentionally. I'm not trying to say, let's go out and be great today. Let's go out and be perfect today. I'm not trying to set a standard where if we had a really rough week, or we just got off a really rough project and we've obviously got some work to do to get back to level, I'm not going to go out and set the standard that I want everybody clicking on all cylinders day one. I'm going to go out and set the standard that, hey, this is where we're at right now. I'm looking for a 5% better day. I'm looking for us to be less bad. And the phrase that we said way too often in the TACP community was, I need you to suck a little bit less. Not a lot, just a little bit less. And that's, first of all, you chuckle, it's a little bit funny. That humor, that kind of opens people up to have more of an honest conversation and take a more honest look at what their performance has been. But more importantly, it's all a process. And there's no end to this process. If there is no perfect, it's not something you're ever going to reach. While that might seem like you're not going to reach your goal, well, first and foremost, if your goal is perfect, you need a new goal. but you're not chasing something unattainable. There's just no roof on how much more good or less bad or sucking less you could be. Just taking small incremental steps to get better at what you do every single day until you're where you want to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. It harkens me back to a book that I bought for 3 different teams that I've led. And the book is called Raving Fans. And I think I have the author right. I think it's Ken Blanchard, and he's the guy who wrote 1 Minute Manager. And to your point, he said one of the best ways to get raving fans as clients, as customers, was to do 1% over what the client expects on a continuous basis. Don't wow them. Don't blow them away. Let's just 1% greater than their expectations. And to your point, 2 to 5% better than we did yesterday. And so, I've always loved that. Don't shoot for the moon. I know there's a lot of cliche shoot for the moon, land in the stars kind of stuff. And I don't subscribe to that. I'm like, okay, how did we do yesterday? Are we 5% better? So now that you're in, your feet are really entrenched in the corporate world, what do you think are the most important lessons that you've learned as a leader in the corporate world now? In your first year, I know that that's a little bit of a loaded question, but what are the big ahas for you?
The first real aha moment I had was I was shadowing on my first sales call with a member of my team. And to be completely fair, like I already said earlier, that I don't have any science or tech or math background. I'm not that good with numbers. I'm not that good with technology. I'm not that good with pretty much anything that you would expect a construction worker to be really good at or a construction team to be really good at. So I go on this call and I was just lost in the sauce, completely lost. I had no idea what they were talking about for equipment. I had no idea what they were talking about with pull plans or with change orders. I'd never even heard the term change order before. So I took a back seat and I just observed. And when we walked out, I must have had this like overwhelmed look on my face. And the guy I was with said, "That's not your value. Like what we just did, that's not the value you bring." Because that was a call, that was a talk with someone who's technically minded. Your value is with people who want to be expressed what the value our company brings is. So I don't need you to go tell them, here's a 500 horsepower, 10 megawatt, whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to add value to the team doing that. I'm going to add value by communicating and establishing a presence and building that client relationship. So number one was, if you're going into a job or going into a project thinking that you know exactly what you're supposed to do there, you're probably setting yourself up for a little bit of a hiccup or disappointment or minor failure, because I had such a huge vision of what this sales call was going to be like. I thought I knew exactly what we were going to go and say. I had it scripted. I was ready to go, man. And it just didn't play out that way. I set myself up for failure because I didn't understand my role. Understand what your role is, capitalize on it, own it. For me, that was the single biggest thing I had to learn.
I remember I came crashing down to earth, transitioning from the military and into my first job. And I think some of that is because I had muddy boots most of the time. And, I was very much used to the muddy boots, downrange style of leadership that, it just didn't fit. So, I was reintroduced when I transitioned into humility and listening. And you're right, understanding what my role was and building those critical relationships. We've gone on for almost an hour now, Dan, and God, you've had a ton of gems, but as a senior leader, if you had to give advice, 2 pieces of advice, we'll close out with your 2 best pieces of advice: retention, right people, right seats. What would you tell other leaders out there that will help them be more successful in getting the talent that they need to propel their company forward? I'm going to give you the last word on it, and then I'm going to close us and bring us home.
All right. 1, understand that the game has changed a whole lot really, really quickly. And that part of that change is the shifting expectations. The wave of shifting expectations is just starting to build. It's not cresting. It's not on a downswing. It's just getting started. So agility is going to be really, really important in understanding exactly what your employees are looking for and exactly what the candidate pool or the talent pool that's out there really, really wants, because they do have the opportunity to really name their price right now. There is a huge disparity between the number of jobs that are available and the number of people who are actively seeking jobs, and the people who are seeking jobs, the ball is in their court. they get to play it however they want right now. So have a great understanding of exactly what appeals to who you're trying to get to. And then number 2, just an aggressive sales mindset. And aggressive and sales probably doesn't appeal to a lot of people that might be more attuned to listen to an HR or a podcast along these lines. But let me explain. Sales is just taking action and solving problems. Aggressive is not rude. It's not in your face. It's just having a bias for action where other people don't. If you can do those 2 things effectively, and you can do them when they're expected to be heard, and you can do them without sounding overly preachy or sounding too assertive or dominating, like that bad sales guy that calls you on the phone when you're in the middle of dinner and wants to talk to you about your car's extended warranty or whatever, without sounding like that person, if you can do those 2 things effectively, then people are going to be attracted to you. Part of that is figuring out how to get to them in the first place. They're in different places. They congregate in different places than they used to. I'm not talking about physical congregation. I'm not talking about they go get drinks at a different bar. But your talent, based on what you're looking for, understand where they are, understand what appeals to them, understand how they want to be communicated with, capitalize on those 3 things, reel them in.
Awesome. Well, Dan, punching up on an hour. I tell you, these things go really, really, really fast. And there's probably 100 other things we could chat about.
No, I was just going to say, this is fun, man. Like, I didn't realize an hour had passed. I'm sitting here enjoying myself too much.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, sorry to put you up against time. You know, we kind of keep them so people can knock them out. But I wanted to leave you with a couple things. First of all, my gratitude for finding EF Overwatch in the Talent War group. Number 2, for kicking ass, taking names, and being just another great example of veteran leaders out there in the corporate world, demonstrating that leadership is leadership and making a difference, empowering the economy. And, you know, lastly, for taking the time out of your busy day to come on the podcast. I'm grateful. Tons of gems. And man, this was just great. I really, really appreciate it.
No. I mean, that goes both ways. I got to thank you for the same 3 things. I've joked that the house I'm in, where I'm at, and where we're living, this is all the Talent War's house. My wife doesn't think it's very funny, but I know that we wouldn't be in the position we are if it wasn't for you and Mike and the rest of the team just absolutely crushing it. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. When they reached out to me and said, do you want to be on this? I was like, done. Just tell me when. I'm not going to pass up that.
Well, we may do it again. And just for the record, so you feel better, Dan, I know. But it's taking me at least a decade to realize that I don't need my wife's validation on that front, because she thinks she's funny. She doesn't think I'm funny. I don't know what that is. My kids think I'm funny. So I think that really helps.
Heard this too deep and probably shouldn't go on the podcast, but Lauren and I are expecting. So I hope my kid thinks I'm funny. I'm going to have a little girl. And if I can't make her laugh, then my world is going to turn upside down, man.
Oh my God. That's awesome. Congrats. I am now the proud grandfather of 3. My baby girl is turning 29. And I'll give you some advice, brother, right back. And, you know, I think somebody told it to me. I had no idea just how blindingly fast that little girl, that I call her Tigger, because she would fall out of her crib. And I remember her hitting the floor, and she didn't just hit once. She hit 2 or 3 times. It was like a rock skipping across the floor. So I started calling her Tigger for that. And now I have a grandson from her and her husband in the summer play soccer with me. Great guy named Michael. And it goes by in the blink of an eye. So I would tell you, man, enjoy every single second of it, even the destruction of the house. And the only other thing I'd tell you is start saving for college now, because I don't think that college tuition bubble is ever going to pop. So if there's any university administrators out of there, you guys have got to get your collective stuff together. It's getting too expensive to attend college, and those degrees are becoming less and less worth the paper they're printed on. And that's just my 2 cents as a recruiting professional. But Dan, good to have you. I'm going to close this out and bring us home. And so thank you again very much for your time, and all the Talent War listeners. We really appreciate you. We hope that you share this podcast. If you have any ideas for topics, by all means, send them along. But we thank you guys very, very much for listening. And this is going to be the home of all things talent. And with that, it's Dan and George, and we are out. And thank you for listening to the Talent War podcast, where we discuss all things talent, focusing on a true talent mindset, which is a core belief that the only true competitive advantage you can hope to achieve and maintain is your talent. Join us for the next episode of the Talent War podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, subscribe, please leave a review, and connect with Dr. Tom Lokar and myself on Talent War Group's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram accounts, and send your comments and inquiries to media@Talent War Group. The Talent War podcast is brought to you by the Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm. With services like talent acquisition, leadership development, seminars, and executive coaching, we will work with you to create talent solutions to your business problems. To get started, please visit us at www.talentwargroup.com.